Hi and welcome to SCW, the wrestling channel here on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. Please subscribe right now. Leave any comments in the comment section. Please like and share the video as well. Ask SCW, the Q&A back once again for you this week, answering your questions in the wrestling community. If you want to leave a question, drop a question in the comments below. Leave the hashtag AskSCW, or you can follow me on platforms such as Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, all coming up on your screen right now of where you can follow and like. But of course, in the meantime, today is actually NXT Takeover in your house. You can go and check out those predictions on the channel right now, although I do encourage you to stick around for the Q&A first, and you can always go and check that out at the end of this video. But without further ado, we've got some questions to get through this week from Twitter.com and from Facebook as well. Let's get through to our first question right now. And it comes from DBW Podcast. Was the Drake Maverick storyline exploitative and in poor taste towards the wrestlers who actually lost their jobs? Yes, it was bad taste really to do that. I mean, the thing is, when we look back at it, Drake Maverick, in my opinion, did lose his job. He was one of those people that was cut. Apparently, Triple H had said in a recent interview that it took him by surprise that Drake Maverick was actually cut from one of those people that was released. And clearly, Drake Maverick did a video and it went viral. A lot of people gave a lot of sympathy, and it seemed to come to the point that Vince wanted him back. And yeah, I guess everything was put in place there of how they could turn it into a storyline and make something of it. Now, we can go into the detail of if the storyline was in good taste, but we'll go into whether it was a good storyline a bit later on in a further question. But yeah, I mean, you could say that this was definitely in poor taste at a time, not just for wrestlers. I mean, we can take about the wrestlers first off. People like Leo Rush has been quite open on Twitter saying how much he thinks it's been in bad taste and how, you know, it's kind of perhaps insulting for someone like himself who was one of those that was cut, and for the other wrestlers that were cut. But think about the fans watching as well. This is quite an uncertain time, and for a lot of fans, we're all looking, and some of us may be out of work, not able to work at the current time, may have lost your job, may have lost other things as well, and they're watching this play out in front of on TV for them and expecting to be entertained by it. And a lot of people probably are not entertained by it because of the fact that they are suffering the same thing themselves. So yeah, it's in very poor taste in that way, and yeah, it's one of them things that you could argue and turn around and say that yeah, WWE does do a lot of their best work when it's actually done where it's blurring the lines, but is this perhaps one line that's blurred too far? But we'll carry on with Drake Maverick's storyline with our next question from the Wednesday Night Warlop. They're asking, is the Drake Maverick storyline the worst thing going in wrestling right now? Well, as we discussed in that last question, yeah, it's in poor taste, and that's probably why it's not a good thing put together. But is it the worst storyline in wrestling right now? Now, I can't say that it is, because like I say, with the blurred lines, yeah, it's something that perhaps hits a lot of mark with a lot of people, but when we look at how the storyline has turned out, Drake Maverick didn't win the tournament, but he got himself to the finals of that tournament. A lot of people were getting behind him and were rooting for him, and to have that moment where we actually did see him get his job back at the end of the match, where Triple H came out and handed him a contract to sign, it kind of had a feel-good ending to that story. And although it's a bad taste to all those others that have lost their jobs, people at home that are actually probably saying to themselves, well, I'm in a bad position and I'm seeing this play out on TV, it is kind of nice at the end of it to see that someone got their job back, and Drake Maverick was that guy that was fortunate enough to do that, and maybe it does give hope for everyone watching at home that that there is light at the end of the tunnel, things will hopefully get better, and that a lot of people will perhaps get their jobs back or able to find work or get work, and that there can be good times ahead. So in that way, it had a feel-good ending to that storyline. But my question with it is it the worst storyline going? No, because of the fact that actually it was kind of well done, despite the fact of it being in poor taste. We look at other storylines that are going on throughout WWE, and there's definitely a lot worse going on. The least favourite storyline, what I think the worst storyline going on right now is Braun Strowman with The Miz and Morrison. I think it's absolutely dreadful. I want my monster back in Braun Strowman. I want the guy from 2-3 years ago who isn't upset by his protein shake being mucked around with by two guys that are probably in their mid to late 30s acting like 12-year-olds. I want to see Braun Strowman. I mean, yes, he did sort of flip that that sort of van over. But I want to see Braun where he was kind of reckless and just didn't care and would do that anyway. Like that was Braun Strowman like 2-3 years ago. He would absolutely almost cause people to be like near death experiences with a lot of them. It was but it was entertaining. It was fun to watch, and I feel that Braun works best as a heel. It wasn't work for me as a face with Braun Strowman. We've tried it for a long time now, and for me, he just feels a watered down version of himself, and it really. It's watering down the championship, the reign, everything. I want to see Braun back to how he was before. And as I say, Miz and Morrison, they shouldn't really be in the position they're in to begin with. Miz has done well, really. In the last 6 months, he's been in 2 WWE Championship matches, so he's done well in that way. But you could argue that he was never really in a position where you kind of earn either of them. From being someone that's been in the company for a long time, yes, someone that's, from that status, but from someone that's been winning matches. I mean, these guys have been in the mid card and recently, lost a tag team match to the Lucha House Party, and all of a sudden they're in a WWE Championship handicap match. It doesn't really make sense when they're on a losing streak, and yet they're acting like 12-year-olds as well. And this is not a knock on the performers. This is a knock on the creative. These guys are all very talented people and can be used much better. So for me, that is definitely a storyline that is currently the worst in WWE. I mean, when we look at the Drake Maverick one, like I say, poor taste, yes, but it's been executed well. The Jeff Hardy storyline, a lot of people would say that is probably one again, but I feel, again, it's in poor taste. So far, I think it made an interesting episode of viewing, as long as it doesn't have repercussions which come out later down the line, but we won't know that at this point, and I imagine Jeff Hardy was on board with that storyline, so we'll have to wait and see what comes of it. But for me, those 2 storylines, even though perhaps in poor taste, I've been fine with them. But when we see a storyline, what we saw on SmackDown this week with Braun Strowman, Miz and Morrison with slime and a bad protein, it's WWE's writing at its worst, in my opinion. Drake Maverick is the man of the moment this week. Another question featuring Drake here. The hard-hitting wrestling show asking, will Drake Maverick having a new contract, will he get another opportunity for the Cruiserweight title? Now, before answering that question, I actually appeared on the Hard Hitting Wrestling show this week. I was on their YouTube channel. You can see it on their website as well. We discussed NXT Takeover, so you can go and check that out as well on their channel. Go on their platform and go and give it a check out. They're great guys. They've got great videos, great content, so go and check them out. But going on to Drake Maverick, I do think he is probably not finished at the moment in the Cruiserweight Championship title challenge. My only fear is that the storyline now has kind of played out. The storyline was almost a bit like Drake was out of work and needed to get himself where he's back in work. Well, he's back in work now. If we take back an old storyline, Heath Slater back in 2016, he was someone that was, when they did the original draft, he was without a show. He's got kids, and he was trying to get himself on a brand, try and get himself some relevance, and eventually he found himself on SmackDown and became, a SmackDown Tag Team Champion, and he got his contract. And then, well, nothing happened for a long time. Heath Slater kind of just went and fell by the wayside. They lost the tag team belts after a couple of months, and that was it. Nothing more was kind of said of it, and Heath was lost in the shuffle and became arguably part of the catering club. So, I mean, this is what we don't want to see for Drake Maverick. I mean, Triple H must see something in him. I think NXT is probably a better home, but my fear is with Drake Maverick that that Cruiserweight title may not come. Will he challenge? I think so, yes, but I actually feel that this, hopefully I'm wrong, could be the start of a slippery slope for Drake in NXT, and where he becomes someone that's there and yes, has his job, which is most important, but someone that makes up the numbers. And I hope I'm wrong with that, because Drake is a very talented guy. I was hoping that if he did leave WWE, that he would have actually gone back to Impact Wrestling, because I do think he had a role to play there where he could have been, very well used in amongst that company. So I hope WWE find a good use for him within NXT, whether it's the Cruiserweight division, whether it's maybe, helping someone in a form of a stable, whether he's the number 2 guy to someone else, maybe that's bigger. Drake Maverick has a lot of great assets that he can use if you followed him through his career. Like I said, in Impact Wrestling, he was like a chief of scout for like the hierarchy with EC3 and Dixie Carter, which was always fun to watch that storyline play out. He was X-Division champion as well, like we said, with the Cruiserweight Championship. He has his roles and has his way. He can play face, he can play heel. So there's a lot of things you can do with Drake, but I just hope for him he doesn't get lost in that shuffle, because now that storyline has kind of played out, there's got to be a way to keep that momentum for him, because now, the interest will start to go down from fans, and possibly even creatively, because they got the blow off, they got what they wanted. Drake found his way to the final, which I'm sure originally was meant for Kushida. I don't think at the start of this tournament Drake was going to be in the final. I think it was going to be Fantasma and Kushida in the final. So plans changed. Drake got his opportunity, made the most of the opportunity. Now it has to be built on. Otherwise, we may see another Heath Slater from 2016. And I think for all of us saying it, I don't think any of us want that. Our next question, I believe, is from a first-time asker. Welcome, Harvey Smith. How do you think Fantasma is going to inevitably turn heel? Well, I mean, we've seen these masked wrestlers being abducting other superstars. I believe we had Raul Mendoza, Joaquin Wilde, I think, was another one that was abducted. And then we see backstage a couple of times that it looked like they were trying to get Fantasma, but were unsuccessful. We see with Tozawa, and again, it was unsuccessful. Fantasma stopped that in its tracks. I think it's going to kind of come out inevitably that Fantasma is the guy that is behind all of this, and that it's just to perhaps throw us off track, that it's not Fantasma where really it is. I think that that's kind of how the storyline will kind of play out, and I think that he eventually will be some sort of leader of some sort of stable, whether it's some of these cruiserweights that in some sort of that kind of way. I wonder if there'll be other people that may be abducted in the meantime. Maybe that's where the Cruiserweight Championship takes its next turn. Maybe the first real challenger for that championship, actually there's an attempted abduction, and we can see it kind of play out through that way, where eventually we do kind of get somewhere closer to getting a reveal. But I think that that's what is probably going to be playing out for the storyline. I do think that Fantasma is going to turn heel, like you've suggested on there, and I think he'll be a good heel. I mean, he was King Cuerno in Lucha Underground. Fantastic heel. Natural in the role as well. In fact, the latest series of that, I think, was season 4. I believe it was a babyface, and for me that didn't connect as well. Fantasma's been fine in WWE so far, and I believe he's actually a face in Impact Wrestling when he was there as well. He's fine as a babyface, but his work is much stronger as a heel, and I think, like yourself, I think a heel turn is inevitable, and I think that's the best way to do it. He has that stable, and he has these masked men who will probably be revealed as well of being on his side, and maybe we could have 4 or 5 strong in a Fantasma stable carrying the Cruiserweight Championship. I think it could be interesting. Something different for the Cruiserweights. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that storyline will play out. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to know what everyone thinks about Fantasma, the Cruiserweight Championship, even the Drake Maverick stuff as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Austin Whitley with our next question for us now. You might have been asked this already, but what, in your opinion, is the greatest wrestling match ever? Well, I haven't been asked this question, actually. And I'm sure Wrestle Talk, Adam Blompier, is making a top 10 list as we speak. So I'm sure we'll get many different options of what the greatest wrestling match is ever. If we look from an old school perspective, because I think it's kind of hard to give one answer, I would start on that right now. But if we look at different eras and different generations, maybe together at the end, maybe I can come up and give you one answer. But if we look at the golden era, and a lot of people, when we talk about the greatest wrestling match ever, a lot of people go back to WrestleMania 3. They talk about Ricky Steamboat and Macho Man Randy Savage. A lot of people want to recreate that magic, recreate that match. They look at that as like almost a tool of what you go over and say that was the greatest wrestling match, and what can I do to make that, because it was the biggest show at that time, and the biggest match was outshone by this great wrestling match, which was arguably supposed to be filler up until the main event of Hogan and Andre the Giant. So that is definitely one that has to stand out. When we look at wrestling today, we see so many great wrestling matches on a weekly basis. The superstars today have got the movesets of making a match now down to an absolute T. But what I think misses from a lot of today's stuff is perhaps some psychology and a little bit of story just to tell things. You know, we have these great, perfectly timed flips of how you wonder how someone can flip 3 times over and somehow, hit a leg drop perfectly, but you sort of think to yourself, yeah, but what was the purpose and what was the reasoning behind it? And when you look at a match like Savage and Steamboat, there was purpose behind everything of what was going on. I was always a big fan around 10 years ago of the matches with CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. I thought they always put out great matches. If you look back in like the TNA history with AJ Styles and Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe, those guys when they had matches with each other were always incredible as well. But I mean, if we look at sort of like a more modern, perfect sort of near that sort of 5-star kind of quality wrestling match, I think a lot of people look back at John Cena AJ Styles from the Royal Rumble in 2017. That was given like a 5-star sort of classic, and a lot of people, on the main roster thought that that was absolute perfection at the time. I don't even think that match even left the ring side. It was all stayed in amongst the ring in that match. I'd have to go and rewatch that to be sure, but I'm sure I remember JBL making a comment to that back in the day. A lot of NXT takeovers, everyone loves the matches with Johnny Gargano, people like Daniel Bryan, who's not on NXT obviously, but Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole, and there's so many great wrestling matches that we get week in and week out. It basically makes you wonder why this tagline was given for Backlash with Edge and Randy Orton, because without being horrible, these guys could have a mega great match, but the greatest wrestling match ever, you're doomed to fail. You have to be the best match ever. We're not even talked about New Japan. New Japan puts out these amazing wrestling matches. Okada Omega, is one. When we talk about the likes of like Naito and Ospreay, and there's so many great wrestlers and put out great wrestling matches. It's really hard to give you a one-word answer. So let's go with what my personal favourite one is. And there's another one I've not even mentioned is WrestleMania 25, The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. A lot of people deem that to be the greatest wrestling match ever as well. So there's a lot of them in there. I'm going to go with Nakamura and Styles from Wrestle Kingdom. I believe it was back in 2016, just before both came to WWE. At that time, I remember watching that match and was just wowed out of my seat before anything else. So that's going to be my official answer for you, because that was the one match at that time where I look at it and I think of it as almost like a favourite match going back on. But I've only ever watched it, I think, twice. So, when you turn around and say, like, some matches you can watch them again and again because they're that good. Some matches of my favourite matches I've seen multiple times. But this one I haven't seen as often. So I wonder if, and now it's been perhaps a few years since I've seen it, maybe would I go back and feel the same? I'm not so sure, but that's definitely the answer I'll give for you now. But I do think perhaps Undertaker Shawn Michaels WrestleMania 25, which was a late one to mention, is definitely one that I think a lot of people would agree with. And I think you have to go back to the stem of where it comes from. Savage and Steamboat is one that I think that a lot of people, when you look at the time of the golden era, wrestling wasn't sort of like that. And it means Steamboat would carry on to do work like that as well. Him and Ric Flair in 1989 had a great trilogy to go on the WWE Network and go and look at that with in the WCW sort of NWA kind of era there. In 1989 they had 3 epic matches, Flair and Steamboat, and they're definitely worth checking out. I think it was Beach Blast, I think was one of them, and there was one early in the year. The one that was early in the year, I think it was like January 1989. That match is absolutely outstanding, probably the best of their matches, so I recommend definitely going to check that one out. But yeah, final answer for you, because I feel now I'm just listing off loads of great matches, because it's that hard to give a good answer to this question. But I say my personal favourite is Nakamura Styles, for that reason, as a wrestling match, because they just literally beat the tar out of each other, and did things that you just, at that point, with moves that were banned in WWE and all the rest of it. But looking at it, I think it stems from Savage and Steamboat, and I think we've evolved with great matches like Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and AJ and John Cena. Those sort of matches I'd say would be up there, but it is impossible to give just one, even though my favourite is Nakamura Styles. Next questions come from George Jones, and just to say, George Jones has done some work with SCW this week. Actually, he was involved on the NXT predictions. Go and check them out now. But he asked 2 questions for us this week. Who would you like to see challenge Drew for the title at SummerSlam? And he also asks, what have you made of the continual absence of Bray Wyatt, and do you think he should return with a stable? 2 great questions there. And the first thing I have to talk about, we'll talk about Drew McIntyre first, is I'm not 100% convinced at the moment that Drew McIntyre is walking away from Backlash as WWE Champion. I just feel that they're building Lashley, and if they want to make a star, or make 2 stars, that maybe it is the right time to move the belt over. Now, you could say Drew's had an early run with the championship, but if you look at maybe like back in the Attitude Era, you look at Stone Cold Steve Austin, for example, he would not have long reigns with the championship. He would have the championship often, but he would also chase the belt. It kept it interesting for him. If Drew McIntyre is the champion for the next 12 to 18 months and just beats everyone, then I think that it becomes a point where you just think, well, it was there for him to face, and there needs to be that drive for Drew to be the man, to be the guy. But there are a few different options, and let's say Drew McIntyre is the guy, because I still think he's the favourite to win at Backlash at this point. I'm just not 100% nailed on. But let's say if he was to lose, I'd say rematch with Lashley, and then he could win the belt back. But let's say he wins the belt. I think that likelihood is it's probably going to be Brock Lesnar. Not that we want that, but I think we probably will get Drew and Brock one more time. I would say that is probably a safe prediction. If it was to be someone that I wanted him to face, and we're looking sort of through the Raw roster as we speak right now, I would like to see him face Randy Orton. I think that would be a good feud to see these two go down. I feel it's a bit too soon for Edge. I feel Aleister Black is being built well, but I don't see him in that title picture just yet. Seth Rollins has had his chance. He's gone back down the pecking order. But I mentioned Edge, and when we say too soon for Edge, I mean he's just come back this year, and I want to see a story built more for him to go for the championship rather than just put him straight back in there. And I think Edge as well needs to have fans when he goes for it. We want Drew as the made face. So I think it would be better to probably take on a heel. So Randy Orton will be what I want. Brock Lesnar would be what I would expect. But I haven't ruled out that Lashley could be the champion at that point as well, and that these two could go in a program that could go all the way until SummerSlam, and possibly even a triple threat match with Brock coming back into it, because then that way you don't have the same match 3 pay-per-views in a row. As for Bray Wyatt, The Fiend, it's a great point you make up, because The Fiend has been missing out since Backlash. It was damaging in a way when you look at it that Bray Wyatt lost, and we just haven't seen him since. But it feels like we're building towards where maybe this Bray Wyatt character, this is how he kind of deals with a lot of his failures, is that he seems to run away from it all a little bit. He's sort of hidden in his Firefly Funhouse, and he's kind of perhaps putting together that master plan for the Fiend to come back and to do the damage, because he probably realises himself as Bray was not the match. The Fiend is the one to do it. I think the Fiend comes back at Backlash. I think he will probably come after Braun Strowman beats Miz and Morrison, probably in quick and comfortable fashion, and I think that we start to build the Fiend going forward. The Fiend, we should mention as Bray Wyatt, the person as well, has recently become a father again as well. Him and JoJo have had the birth of a new child, so this is probably also another reason why Bray is probably taking a few weeks off at this particular point. So there is probably that element of where we probably have to kind of forgive a little bit that we don't have the Fiend around at the minute. But even if there was some sort of minor video package that was done before he took a few weeks off, just so we had a glimpse of something on the TV, just something to remind us that the Fiend still exists, or Bray Wyatt still exists, I think would have been a nice flavour, a nice touch. Even if it was, say, like one of the puppets just popping up in the background somewhere. You mentioned about having a stable, and I think the belief at one point was that those puppets were going to represent someone to make a stable for Bray, but I believe that plan was either dropped or has just not been used in the meantime. I would be a fan of seeing Bray with a stable. I think that the Fiend is someone to be feared, and I mean, he's tried with followers in the past, and it's not quite worked out for him. But to find someone that he could actually trust in, and find a vulnerable side to Bray again, would be an interesting story to play out, because especially if someone was to turn on that later down the line, because stables are all about building the next star. The Fiend is an attraction and is a star on his own, so it would be about taking that person in and trying to make them up to his level, or at least around about to where maybe we get 6, 9, 12 months down the line that we can build a match between the Fiend and whoever that person would be that he could trust and confide in. I think it would be a fun storyline to play out, but we'll have to wait and see. I have heard rumours as well that they have not given up on Sister Abigail either at this point, but I do wonder why they would still kind of feel that, even though Abby's kind of the witch in this, they kind of almost ruined that thing when we had Bray a number of years ago with that rivalry with Finn Balor. But we won't focus on too much of the negative past of Bray. I mean, he's doing his best to try and fix all of that as we speak, and I think that he's done a good job overall of doing that. But there needs to be more to what's going on with Bray and the Fiend, and I want to see the Fiend come back now after maybe a bit of a break. And I want to see a relentless Fiend. They started with the Firefly Funhouse match at WrestleMania with John Cena, and I want to see the Fiend take up another gear when he comes back in, because I think that, like I said earlier in the video, the Braun Strowman Championship run is just not working for me. I think that the idea is for them to have another match, I believe, before SummerSlam, so Extreme Rules is probably the likely place. So yeah, I expect the Fiend to come back at Backlash. I don't expect him to come back with a stable at this stage, but it's something that could happen down the line. Why not? It could be. If WWE have the plans in there, then perhaps they might throw something together and give us something back, perhaps when the fans are back in attendance in the arenas. Next question coming from Noob and Co. In fact, we've got 3 here for us. Which female WWE superstar will be part of Seth Rollins' faction? Great question, that. Since we're getting Drew McIntyre versus Lashley, a feud that we saw in Impact Wrestling, will we see Karrion Kross versus John Morrison in the future? And the last question coming for us here, will Io Shirai play a major role in Asuka's WWE Raw Women's title run? Interesting questions, all 3 of them there. Starting off then, Seth Rollins with the faction. I never really thought of the idea that they could get a female person in that faction, and I like it. When I think more about it, I think it adds more depth and opens more for what they can do with that Messiah character, just to take it into the women's division as well. And you have to look and say that Seth is preying on the vulnerable and the weak. So you have to look at who are probably the more vulnerable members of that roster. And you have to say it's the members of the roster that are not really being used that well, or are not strong in the division. So you look at it and say that that rules out perhaps a lot of the people that are being used, like Asuka would not be used, Nia Jax wouldn't be used. You could argue Shayna Baszler isn't being used that much, but I wouldn't have her as part of it either. I think that the best person for it is someone who claims that she's finding herself, but although she's finding, she could be someone that could still be easily manipulated, and I think that's Liv Morgan. I think she would be very fitting as well, because she's quite young as well, and if you look, Austin Theory is young in that stable. Murphy has got plenty of years ahead. They're kind of like these young people that are under Seth Rollins' wing and being groomed to become the next big stars. Someone like Ruby Riott could work for the group as well. I think that she's a natural fit and feel for a heel, and I think that she would fit in quite well in the stable. So I think one of those 2 would be the best options, because Liv, I mean, you could argue could still be under the manipulated side, and I think that Ruby Riott, just from a character, the look, I think that she would fit in very well in that Messiah gimmick and stable. So those would be the 2 names that I would be most in favour of seeing. As for Karrion Kross versus John Morrison, never say never down the line, but of course at the moment it would be very, very hard to do. We've got Karrion Kross that's just debuted on NXT. John Morrison is on SmackDown. Both are playing heel roles as well, so it's not something that I expect to see in the immediate or near future, but maybe a year down the line, if Karrion Kross come up to SmackDown or Raw and John Morrison is traded or stays on the same show and becomes a babyface, breaks up from The Miz, then perhaps there's potential, but at this stage, at this time, obviously not in the near future. But as for the last question, very interesting. Io Shirai has been rumoured to come up to Raw or SmackDown following NXT Takeover. Rumours are that they're very high backstage and I feel there could be use for her. I personally, I've said this already, I think it should be better fitted for SmackDown, just because of the fact that Bayley is running out of challenges, to the point now that the SmackDown Women's Tag Team Championships is there now with Bayley and Sasha. So it looks like that's going to take a bit while longer. Bayley needs to defend that belt against somebody, and she's faced pretty much everyone. As much as I'm a fan of Alexa Bliss, I don't think I need to see another Bayley Bliss feud in the middle of the summer, because they always seem to have it around Extreme Rules as well. So I don't need to see that feud again. Nikki Cross we've seen Lacey Evans. We haven't seen Dana Brooke, but then I'm not sure a lot of people would see a lot of believability in that at this point. We've seen Naomi, Carmella. we're going through the division here. There needs to be someone else. So SmackDown, I think, would be a good home. I know that in the comments of another video, you've suggested Raw, and she's very good friends with Kairi Sane. So that would be kind of a potential that could happen. And yeah, if she was to come in as actually you suggested on my other video, which we discussed about Io Shirai previously, that she could come in as a helper for Kairi Sane, and perhaps even maybe that could get involved with Nia Jax. Of course, Nia Jax is feuding with Asuka. Maybe we could get the Japanese lady trio together, and that would definitely be interesting if it was to play out. Whether Io was actually to be involved with Asuka as a face, like as someone as a team or as an opponent, I think would be fascinating TV and something interesting to watch. The only thing I don't want for Io is for it to get lost in the shuffle, if or more or less inevitably when she comes to either Raw or SmackDown. But could she play a part? Most definitely, because if she's on Raw, she's either going to be on Asuka's side or she's going to be challenging, and I think that's what's really exciting with that. I think Asuka and Io Shirai sounds like an incredible match that I'd want to see. I don't know about you guys in the comments below. You have to let me know your feelings on that one. But yeah, I think that would be awesome. But I still stand that I think that SmackDown would be the better place right now, just purely because even though Io Shirai probably is a lot better than the women in an in-ring perspective than a lot of the women on SmackDown, I think that she would naturally fit into the championship picture quite quickly, and she'd be less likely to be lost in that shuffle. So that's why I would prefer that. But if she was on Raw, yeah, I'd be in favour of it, and definitely would see something with her and Asuka going forward. The hard-hitting wrestling show with our next question for us now. Are the Forgotten Sons forgotten after Jackson Riker's comment after President Trump's speech? Yeah, I mean, I did think they would get forgotten on the main roster anyway. I was never quite sure of the call-up, but of course, with everything that's happened this week, it certainly has created a lot of controversy, you could say, is probably the right word amongst the WWE locker room. A lot of people have spoke out against even the Forgotten Sons tag team partners. We're talking Steve Cutler and Wesley Blake, who you could argue to feel sorry for if they were to be held back as a result here, because they've actually come out and especially Steve Cutler, I believe, said that I may be a part of the Forgotten Sons, but my opinions are my own, which was suggesting that his opinions were very different. From reading some sources amongst WWE a lot in the last sort of 24 hours since receiving this question, I've seen that apparently a lot of WWE superstars, yes, are unhappy with those comments that have come up. But I believe as well, looking at some of the earlier tweets that were put out from Riker as well, has caused a bit of a buzz and a bit of a stir. But I do believe a lot of wrestlers do want to just talk to him about the situation and maybe see if they can make him see a different way, a different light. I don't see him being punished over what's happened, but I don't say necessarily that if maybe talents aren't going to work with them, and particularly higher up talents, if you want, maybe it is kind of that market where this could be something that could make them suffer in the long run. But like I say, I do feel perhaps sorry for Steve Cutler and for Wesley Blake in this situation, because they will be labelled the same, which they shouldn't be, because if they have a completely different opinion on this scenario. So I do think that the Forgotten Sons probably would have been forgotten anyway in time, but yeah, this could have an impact on them. It's one of those time will tell situations. They haven't been on TV in the last couple of weeks anyway. I don't think since the pay-per-view, and we'll have to see over the next few weeks. I mean, the tapings are coming up again this week, so if they're featured and what role they're featured, I think we'll have a better understanding. So again, as I say, it's probably a bad answer for this, but it's a time will tell situation. But yeah, we'll see with the Forgotten Sons, and we'll see what happens with Jackson Riker, because like I say, his I believe social media accounts now are private. I don't believe that people can comment or access on them now, so we'll have to wait and see what will happen. Dan the Man Williams is with us next now for our next question. What has been your favourite pay-per-view in the modern era for the last couple of years? Personally, for me, SmackDown. The Raw versus SmackDown format works great. It really does. It's given a bit of life to Survivor Series, which was kind of losing its identity in recent years. You could say in sort of the 10s that it kind of was not having that same feel as it used to. And since we've had the brand split again, and we've had the Raw and SmackDown, we've been able to get the Raw and SmackDown rivalry going on Survivor Series. gives the show a new lease of life once again, back to almost like its old roots as well. And the traditional tag team matches I've always been a massive fan of. So I would agree with you when it comes to that. I'm always a fan of the Royal Rumble each and every year. So it's hard for me to turn around and say the Royal Rumble is always the one that I really look forward to, or WrestleMania. So, but from a pay-per-view that say come in the last couple of years that is exciting and is different to the Survivor Series, to give a unique answer, is actually the night before Survivor Series, which makes that weekend very exciting. And talking about War Games, I absolutely love the War Games concept. I love the modernisation of what they've done of it, and so far every War Games match has been freaking amazing. The Undisputed Era have done a great job in there, and so has whoever they faced. And I hope that it's something that does continue. Even though sometimes from a storyline perspective, the War Games usually means drop everything we're doing. We need a War Games match. It's that time of the year. So far, they've managed to make the concept work really well. So I've been always a fan of it, and yeah, it's good to see it back. So for me, War Games will be my answer on that. But I do agree with you that Survivor Series has taken a new life again, and it's made itself feel like it's part of that big four. So yeah, I agree with you, but I'm also going to shout and say that I think War Games as well would take it for me. Next question is coming from a Tire World Order. Do you think this past episode of Impact was a star-making performance for Zachary Wentz of the Rascalz? He not only had a banger of a tag team match, but he tore it down again in the main event. Really surprising but deserved push for Wentz. What do you think they will do with him next? It's a great question, that one. I mean, he did have actually a really good performance this week on Impact Wrestling, but I don't see at the moment to see a singles push for him. But it's good that they're giving the opportunity for these young talents to try and break out and make something of themselves. I mean, Wentz isn't the only one, really. I mean, Ace Austin, of course, won the match, therefore become the #1 contender for currently the Impact Wrestling Championship. So it feels like Ace Austin is the young guy they're putting the 100% faith in at the moment. But they definitely, Trey got himself to the finals before being taken out. Wentz, they're trying to give these young guys the platform, and using perhaps some of the legends they've got and perhaps some of the ready main eventers they have, that they're trying to make new stars, and you can't argue with that with any wrestling company. That's something that's done really well and something that needs to be applauded with Impact Wrestling. The question that I have for Wentz is what's next with him? Well, I think the quick answer for that one is that the tag team match he was involved in, which they won, is that they're now the #1 contenders for the tag team championships. Dez, another great performer, him and Wentz, they're going to be going for the tag team titles. And as much as actually I will say the North is my favourite tag team in Impact Wrestling and has been for a while, I think they should drop the belts to the Rascalz. I think the timing's right, and we should get new tag team champions, mainly because, I mean, if you look as well, Impact Wrestling, with the pandemic, a lot of their champions have had to be gone missing. Tessa Blanchard is one that's not been around. Jordan Grace took a few weeks off. So we've only really had the X Division Championship present. So, and of course now Moose has of course had the TNA Championship, but of course that's still not recognised as of yet. But you know, hopefully they will have a bit more with that so they can keep that one around for a bit longer. But I think the tag team belts is the situation what they should do right now with the Rascalz. That tag team division, they're one of the strongest units they have in that division, along with the North. And maybe they should have a program. Maybe they should do something that's not just the one and done. Maybe they should have a rivalry to take us to the end of the summer, because they're two great teams, very innovative in their moon sets, and I think they can offer a lot. So I would like to see that. That's what I'd like to see. But of course, to have the opportunity to get into the main event, to show that you can hang in the main event as well and put on a great match, it definitely puts more eyes on you and definitely gets you over. And maybe in time, maybe you can go out and break out as a singles star. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, I would keep him in the tag division, because I think that that's where he can be utilised best. Next question comes from Straight Edge Josh. Do you think Brian and Pillman's loose cannon gimmick would work in today's culture? Sadly not. Brian Pillman, of course, the loose cannon gimmick was wild to say the least. I've been quite fortunate recently. I've been watching a lot of WCW Monday Nitro. Has been my throwback on the network of late, and did get to see a lot of the stuff he was doing in late '95, early '96 with WCW, and yeah, to say he was pushing the boundaries would definitely be an understatement. I know he goes on to a little bit of work in ECW, and later that year signs for WWE. I want to say WWF there, but yeah, of course it was then, becomes WWE. I will stick with WWE for now. But yeah, I mean, later that year, I mean, Brian Pillman actually pulled a gun on Steve Austin in defense of his family on Monday Night Raw. A lot of the stuff that Pillman did was very, as that loose cannon, was unpredictable and was very risky and wouldn't work in the PG market. Sadly, of course, we did lose Brian Pillman far too early. And what I would tell you is that Brian Pillman, had he been around throughout the Attitude Era, I think he would have been definitely WWE champion. I think he would have been a main event player. And probably would have been another strength to WWE in the Monday Night Wars over WCW. But unfortunately, it just wasn't the way it played out. Sadly, we lost Brian too soon, and that never really panned out. But with a loose cannon gimmick in today's era, it would be a very watered down version of what we have come to know and what we knew as Brian Pillman. And if it was done, it just wouldn't work. So I don't think it would get over the same. And like I say, with it being a PG era, I just don't think that WWE would risk that kind of character in today's modern wrestling world. Last question for us this week is from Mike, Italian Habs Mike. And he's got two questions. First is, what possible swerves do you think may happen at TakeOver in your house? And with NXT adding some old school elements to TakeOver, do you see Triple H doing more of that in the future for NXT? I'll first of all say you can check out my predictions for NXT TakeOver in your house. Is available for you, perhaps at the end of this video. It's me and George. We're talking about our NXT predictions for the show. Go for every match show in detail, but I will give you the best of what I can give you in a condensed version rather than a 20-minute episode. But what I will tell you is that I do think there will be a couple of swerves. Yes. I have got a feeling that Dexter Lumis is going to turn on the Velveteen Dream during the main event or the NXT Championship match, and we will get the Dream versus Lumis perhaps heading into SummerSlam if they still have a takeover then. Lumis for me works better as a heel. It's been interesting seeing what's been going on as a face, but I think that they could have a fascinating feud, Lumis and Dream. So I have a feeling that that will happen. I made a bold prediction in the predictions that we may get the Demon Prince, the Finn Balor, because when WWE on the main roster have always had Finn Balor as the Demon, they've always promoted it. In NXT, it was just takeover. It just was a given that we got that, and it was a surprise element. And there's a thing here that Balor, he's going to be. He's going to be annoyed with the way that Priest has been building up to this show, and it might just bring out that demon of Balor, and it could come back. Do I expect it really to happen? Perhaps not, but it's a bold prediction, and I wanted to be fun with it, and I thought I'd throw it out there, and I thought I'd also share it again for this video. And I think it just would be quite fun if it was to, because it's the summertime, and usually when Finn Balor has brought the demon out in recent times, it's always been in the summer, around SummerSlam. So we're in the summer months now. If we don't have a takeover SummerSlam weekend, then maybe this could be that occasion. But I like the Prince gimmick that they've got with Finn Balor at the minute. There's no need to necessarily bring the demon back, but I think that could be a fun little twist. As for the takeovers, I would like to see it happen. I think that this has created a bit of a stir, a bit of a buzz, and a lot of people are more into this just purely because it's in your house rather than just the fact that it's a takeover. I think it adds an extra bit of spice, and I think that maybe we perhaps could or should get some twists on takeovers going forward. We've started to get war games. Maybe this could become yearly within your house, and maybe we might get some of the pay-per-view names come back, because I think that's a great excuse to use them rather than we've how often can we just have Dallas, or we can keep Brooklyn, because Brooklyn is now famous with NXT, but if you look at sort of ones that like Tampa or wherever they've been, you look at it and say there's only so often before it becomes that place again. We've had Chicago twice, we've had Brooklyn, I think it's 4 or 5 times, and we've had New Orleans already, and so you get a point where it can get a bit repetitive, and if they're not in the same place in the same order, then you start to lose a bit of continuity. So I would like to see them bring back things like Judgment Day, maybe Fully Loaded, or different pay-per-views. Even some of the WCW ones I think could be quite fun. It's a shame that AEW got to do Bash at the Beach, because I think that would have been awesome to do in the summertime as well. You could have had in your house at maybe like the February one, for example, for TakeOver, and then at this point in the summer you could have like the Bash at the Beach. I think would be pretty awesome to have that different context of what you can do as well with the staging and how everything would look. I think it would be a lot of fun. So I would definitely be a road I'd like to see them go down, whether it's bringing back some WCW ones, maybe Halloween Havoc could be fun, but then of course we've got War Games just before Survivor Series, so there are different times and places that perhaps certain things things can be used. But I definitely would like to see it done, and I'd like to know what people would like to see in the comments below. Would you like to see NXT take that twist and take the idea of doing pay-per-view names for takeovers going forward, where then the location can still be featured, but it's not seen as critical as what it was, and maybe we can get some fun elements coming here and just add the cool factor to NXT and Takeover even further. Or maybe you might think it's a distraction. Let me know in the comments. But that's all from me anyway, and as I said before, check out my NXT Takeover In Your House predictions, all available for you right now. The winners and losers will be available for you on that, and of course George Jones joined me on that as well, and he gives his predictions as well. So it's a fun listen. It's about 20 minutes long. Go and check it out before NXT Takeover this evening. As well as that as well, Hard Hitting Wrestling Show. I was involved in that. Go and check it on the YouTube channel. They've got it on, I believe, like Spotify as well. They've got their own websites. So make sure you go and check them out. They're on Twitter as well. And they've even asked a question on this show. So make sure that you can go and follow them. And follow everyone. Follow everyone that's asked questions on this actual particular show. Support each other. We're one big happy family in the wrestling community. So yeah, it's all about supporting each other. So give everyone a follow. And let's all grow as one big happy wrestling family. But enjoy NXT Takeover this evening. I'll be back with videos in the week. Backlash predictions will be coming up, so make sure to go and check them out when they come out in the week. I'll probably look to try and do it midweek, I would say, for you, probably perhaps Wednesday or Thursday on the channel. But if you hit the bell on the notifications, you'll know immediately when it's coming up. But that's all from me anyway. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. This has been SCW, the wrestling channel. Have a great day. Take care.